Welcome everyone to another edition of Midweek Mysteries, and thank you all for being here. As always, I am your host, Nick Ryan. If you happen to be new to the show, Midweek Mysteries is a shorter version of our full-length Sunday episodes, where we also enjoy giving a personal shout-out to our newest supporters, so please be sure to tune in. If you're interested in supporting what we do here, please visit us at patreon.com/paranormal mysteries, or head on over to buymeacoffee.com/paranormal, where you can make a simple one-time donation. And of course, subscribing to the podcast and sharing it with your friends is always one of the best ways to show your support, and we appreciate it. And now let's see what the first of our three storytellers have to say. Today's first midweek mystery comes to us from Honey. Honey's story is called Paranormal Experience with Henry. Honey says, "My story starts when I was 13 years old, and it lasted until I moved out of my parents' house at the age of 19. I've always been a little bit of a believer in the paranormal, as my mother would always listen to stories and TV shows about ghosts, ghost hunting, aliens, etc. Despite that belief, we never experienced anything until we moved into a dated apartment in California. I felt like I was constantly being watched there from the moment that we invaded its space. Even though general unease was felt, we were never really concerned, and we accepted that there was just something else in the home with us. It hadn't done anything, and we needed to carry on with our lives. Sometimes my mother and I would both see the shape or shadow of someone leaving the room, usually just the lower portion, out of the corner of our eyes. One time we were so certain in what we had both seen that we had assumed it was my stepdad, who had woken up from his nap and walked by the kitchen where we were sitting, and then into the living room. We called to him, but when he didn't respond, we looked and realized that he hadn't woken up at all and was still sleeping the entire time on the other side of the house. After about a year, we packed up and moved to what was going to be our forever home, and that's when all the activity seriously ramped up. And over time, we started to refer to our resident ghost as Henry. Henry liked to play with us. Very often, things that we had been 100% certain were in one place would go missing, only to show up in the exact spot they should have been 10 to 20 minutes later. Sometimes, especially at night, our TV would fluctuate from max volume to mute, up and down repeatedly. Other times it would turn off and then back on. At first, we assumed it was a faulty TV or remote, but it happened even after we had replaced both of them over the years. Henry's other favorite activity was knocking over plates and dishes in the cabinets. Ones that hadn't moved for months would suddenly fall out of the cabinets or come crashing down, bringing everything with them. During the evenings, when she was alone, my mother would sometimes feel what felt like someone gently running their finger across her hair. My stepfather would frequently feel someone touching and caressing his feet, which dangled off the edge of the bed due to his height. We all would see Henry out of the corner of our eyes, usually when walking by the hallway that led to the bathrooms. It was difficult to ever get a good look, as of course, nothing was there when we would do a double take, but we all agreed that this spirit had on a dark red shirt and black pants, was male, and was always staring at us from the master bedroom. The activity that eventually drove me out of the house all occurred on the same day. That morning I was lying in my bed, reading a book, when I heard someone whisper my name, as if they were trying to get my attention from the doorway. I thought it was my parents, but I could still hear them sleeping in their bedroom. Thoroughly spooked, I sat in the dining room with all of the lights on until I was ready to go back to bed, but the discomfort never went away. When I went to bed that night, I shut off the lights and shut the door as I usually do. My room had blankets hung over the windows to make it extra dark, and it was near impossible to even see a hand in front of your face at night, which is just the way that I liked it. About 10 minutes after I laid down, I heard a knock on my door. Assuming it was a parent, I opened my eyes and was going to tell them to come in when I saw a figure by the door, darker than my dark bedroom and easily as tall as the doorframe. By the time I gasped, it lunged toward me. I panicked, shut my eyes, and started screaming, and after a moment, my mother ran into the room, flicked on the light, and of course, nothing was there. From that moment on, I refused to be in the home alone, and would sit outside if it was needed. I moved out shortly after, and have had a peaceful, spirit-free life ever since. Henry is still there, though. I returned to visit my parents about 10 years later with my then fiancé. I never told him about these experiences until after we left, and he mentioned that he was glad we were getting out of there, as the house gave him the creeps, and he felt like he was continuously being watched. I'm sorry this is so long, but I wanted to be as detailed as I could. I've asked my parents if they still experience anything, especially because they moved next door to me last month, and apparently Henry, whatever he is, has come with them. Time will tell if I will experience anything at their new home in the future. Our next midweek mystery comes to us from Christian. Christian says, I recently found your podcast and have been hooked on all the listener stories. So, I would like to share 2 of mine. The first being when I was 13. I have only had sleep paralysis a handful of times, but one experience is the strangest of all of them. So, it was morning. I could tell because the light was shining through the window, but I could not move. But I could look around the room. My heart started racing because I could see myself laying down, but I couldn't move or do anything. I closed my eyes a few times, trying to wake up from what was going on, until I had a look at the foot of my bed, where I could just see a head of someone staring at me. They had a pale face with black around their eyes, almost like face paint, but they just stared at me. I don't know why, but I was not scared or fearful of who I was looking at. I was just startled that someone was sitting there. So I closed my eyes again, and I was awake. I could move, and when I looked around, the room was the same, with the light shining through the windows and everything, but they were not there anymore. The next story that I have to tell is from a friend. My friend worked at a restaurant in Fort Worth, Texas. She was a waitress and had worked there for a while, so she had gotten to know the owner, who worked at the restaurant frequently, and she had known the family of the owner as well, as it was a family-owned business. So the story starts with the owner going on a hunting trip with another gentleman that was not very well known by anyone besides the owner. The man was wealthy, but not much was known beyond that. So they left to go on their trip, and the owner had been killed in the forest and had apparently been shot by a hunter. When the police questioned the man whom the owner went hunting with, he told them that they had gone hunting and that they had not worn their vests, and the man had mistaken him for an animal and shot and killed him. But when the body was found, the body appeared to have been dragged, and it looked as if there had been a struggle. However, the case was dropped against the man, and nothing had gone beyond that. So, when the news broke to the workers of the restaurant, everything eventually resumed as normal. The restaurant was still open, and some of the family had kept it running. But one night, my friend was walking through the kitchen during the closing hours, and she saw a man walk through the kitchen to the bar. She had not recognized the man because of how fast he was walking, and she was only able to see the back of him as he went through the door to the bar. The restaurant was no longer open, so she went to go check on the man, and to let him know that the restaurant was closed and that he could not be there. As she walked through the door to the bar, she didn't see the man anywhere, and she wouldn't see him again after that. When she explained what she had seen to the wife of the owner, she was deeply shocked, because the way that she described how the man looked was the exact way that the owner looked before he had left for his trip, the same clothes and all. Later it was brought to light that the owner was involved in mob dealings, and the restaurant staff speculated that maybe the wealthy man who he went hunting with was somehow involved with the mob as well. Whatever it was, my friend saw something that was supernatural. Thank you for your show. Our next midweek mystery comes to us from Bracky. Bracky says, Hello, Nick. I've been listening to your podcast since moving into my own place, and wanted to write in about some of my favorite animal encounters. I, like many readers, have had many encounters, but I would like to share some light-hearted ones. I spent my days at a local horse barn, starting at the age of 7. My dad would drop me off before work and pick me up when his shift was over. One of the first jobs given to me was to feed a horse named Mike. Mike lived in a stall in the farthest end of the barn, as he was suffering from a serious health problem. Twice a day, I would mix up his special food with his medicine and bring it to him. He always stood in the back of the giant stall and just watched me drop his food in. This went on for maybe a year, when one day the old farmhand stopped me from grabbing Mike's food and told me Mike wouldn't be needing that anymore. Little me understood enough and put the bucket down. 10 years later, I brought in my own horse, and the only stall available was Mike's old end stall. I loved that the stall was away from the rest of the barn, offering peace and quiet from the other 60-plus horses that lived there. I understood why Mike had lived his days out here. One summer day, I was bent over, picking out my horse's food, while he hung his head over the stall door. Suddenly my horse tucked his tail and leapt over me, crashing frantically into the door of his stall. As I tried to jump out of the way, I felt a cold breeze hit me, and as I straightened up, my eyes locked into the back of the stall, and there stood Mike. He looked at me with his head turned towards me, as he had all those days that I had brought him his food. And as I stared frozen, Mike turned his head straight ahead and faded back into the wall. My horse settled down once Mike was gone. I have seen many, many ghost horses at this barn, but that, to this day, is the only time I've ever felt cold during a presence. I have many more stories of ghost animals. I've worked at many horse barns and vets, and once animal spirits are comfortable with you, I swear they love to get your attention. I've always had positive animal ghost encounters, many short and funny stories if you'd want me to share. I've also had encounters with orbs, strange lights, a taily boo encounter, and a Bigfoot encounter. But one of my first ghost encounters went as follows. I was standing with my godmother, leaning on the gates of our horse barn's large indoor arena. We had all the lights off, and it was pitch black. You couldn't see anything at all in the closed arena. And suddenly, this orb of whitish blue light appears, maybe the size of a grapefruit, at the farthest end of the arena. And then my godmother, the barn owner, says, "Oh look, a ghost. Hi, ghost," and waves the same way she would greet the horses. And then this orb bolts, exactly how a horse would have playfully galloped across the arena to greet her. I don't remember how close the light got, because I turned to stare at the smiling face of my godmother as she watched this orb. She was amazing. As we come to the end of this edition of Midweek Mysteries, I'd like to say thank you to all of you for tuning in and supporting the podcast. And a special thank you goes out to Honey, Christian, and Brocky for writing in and sharing their experience with all of us. If any of you have thoughts, advice, or a similar experience that you'd like to share with one of tonight's storytellers, you can email me, and I'll be sure to forward your message onto them. If you've witnessed something unexplainable and you'd like to have your story shared on the podcast, please contact me at paranormalmysteriespodcast@gmail.com or visit paranormalmysteriespodcast.com and click on the Tell Your Story link. All of our contact information can be found in the show notes. Until next time, I hope you all have a safe and healthy rest of the week, and we'll see you back here on Sunday with our next episode. From all of us at the Paranormal Mysteries Podcast, thank you so much for listening, and please remember, don't wait for the unknown to come to you. Get out there and find it.